Hello, BookTube. We're back to my library tour for 2022. I'm giving myself a visual record of all the books that I have at the moment, plus plenty of books that are on my mind that I don't have anymore. And for the first time, we're dealing with the little book room here, and we're going from east to west. And for the first time, I am aware of the fact that there is going to be a gap in this visual record, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of doing it at all. There is going to be a gap. It's not going to happen today. But I can see now that there is a part of the top shelf of this bookcase, because of the construction of the bookcase, that is impossible for me to film on my own. Not the question of the books, it's a question of the camera. The only way, we're not there yet, but we're going to be there soon, and the only way that I could film a portion of this bookcase would be to have someone else, another person, stand here and film me doing this. There is no way for me to do this on the little $5 tripod that I have. None. And there's no way for me to do it. I tried. There's no way for me to do it while I myself am holding the camera. The logistics just don't make it possible. Which means there's going to be a gap, and that's very annoying. So I'm thinking that the approach I will take to fixing that gap, even though it ruins a little bit of the in situ verisimilitude, I think the approach I might take, because I don't want there to be a gap, obviously, if there's going to be a gap, then I'm going to look back at this and say, well, what books weren't there? I don't remember. So I think the approach that I will take is the Jason Harrigan approach. Now, a lot of you who are brand new to the channel won't know who that is. And you might be wondering who that is, because I mentioned his name often. He's on my mind. I am never book shopping without him, even though he is thousands of miles away in the next parish over. He's a booktuber. I feel certain that he'll be back. I never know for sure with any of my with any of the OGBG. I never know how often they will make videos or what will sidetrack them. But when he does a library tour, oh my God, his library tours are incredible. They're incredible. Him and Mark Richardson, really, their library tours are epic. And their channels are both there. You can both go and look at them anyway, even if they're not currently making videos. Jason's approach, just this kind of problem, is to take the books off the shelf and just have them sitting right there in your normal seated filming arrangement. I know that's less exciting, but I'm going to have to do that. For one of these shelves, I'm going to have to do that. But not today. Today, we can press forward. We are on the same bookcase that had classic literature, just canonical classics, which before 2016, I would not have needed to explain to anybody. I would not have needed to clarify what I meant. Now, of course, I do. I not only have to defend it, but it's indefensible. You are a racist colonizer if you even acknowledge that there is such a thing. And that theme ran throughout all of these early shelves, and you naysayers who were saying that Meg does not belong in that listing, time will tell. But now we're on this top shelf, and the top shelf, it's built in a step, which is why it's a nightmare. It's going to be a nightmare to film. And I partly wanted to continue with the idea of canonical classics, only in mass market paperbacks. Each of the steps on this top shelf is too small for trade paperbacks or hardcovers. Just the right size for mass market paperbacks so that when you stack them correctly, you can see everything. I kind of sort of wanted to follow that same rule with this top shelf, but it got, as you're going to see, it got away from me a few times. So one of the things I love about a library tour, specifically this little room, is how easy it makes things to reconfigure. I now have touched and talked about every book in this room, and that makes it much easier for me to look at the whole thing and say, here are the duplicates. These things don't belong here. There's a clear place somewhere else for this thing or that thing. So we're just going to go through these top books. I think we're good for today, and we're probably good for tomorrow. And then after that, there's going to have to be a video where I just take the books off the shelf and sit down with them. I don't know how that's going to work. And in the meantime, the books, we'll do the Transwise books first. So we've got a shelf here with a row of mass market paperbacks and books stacked on top of them. Not many books, but some. Not enough to block the books behind them, which would defeat the whole purpose of this double stacked, stepped arrangement. And I have to tell you right off the top of it, a lot of the books that are transwise on this first step of books are not canonical classics. Some of them are, but a lot of them aren't. Like, for instance, this, The Son of Tarzan. What is this doing here? I have an entire bookcase for mass market paperbacks, just ordinary mass market paperbacks that don't have a theme, or that aren't Penguin classics, aren't canonical classics. This should not be in here. I love this is the old Ballantine cover art. And Ballantine had the rights to this stuff, so they when they were done with this old series of, I don't know if you can make it out, it's kind of a scratchy, slightly imprecise, almost a tiny hint of impressionistic, scratchy design in the artwork. I'm ashamed to say that I don't off the top of my head remember the name of the artist for these covers, but this artist did the covers for the whole run of Tarzan in these old Ballantines. And then Ballantine upped their game and had Frank Frazetta and was it Rowena or no, Boris Vallejo do a whole new run of covers and they changed the black framing of the cover to the white framing to black framing, and give you just a whole nother visual run of Tarzan that is great. I have to confess, I have all of those old Ballantine black mass market paperbacks, and I wish that I had all of these. The next time a whole set of these shows up at the Brattle Bookshop, I will grab them. And the reason that Son of Tarzan is in this room, I don't know where I'm going to put things, as opposed to anything else from that old series, is because it's the only one from those old Ballantines that I have. Not just because it's weird to see Korak, the son of Tarzan, as a beach blonde. That is just weird. But also because pound for pound, no accounting for taste here, pound for pound, Son of Tarzan is probably my favorite Tarzan novel. So it's alone in here. Then we have a mystery novel. What on earth is this doing in here? This should not be in here. Just not. It should just not be in here. This is by Dixie Lyle, and it's called Perfectly Dead, which the sugar from the bowl has spilled out a skull. And this is a murder mystery, a cozy murder mystery, obviously, and it stars a cat. There are many, many cozy mysteries that star cats, and somehow, defying all logic or verisimilitude, in virtually none of them is the cat the actual killer, when I think we all know. Anyway, another murder mystery here. I have a place for these. These, unlike Son of Tarzan has a spot in my heart. Not a big enough spot. It still doesn't belong in here. But at least that I could understand. These other just random murder mysteries that I just put here, I don't know, because I was looking at this shelf and just wanted to get them off my hands or whatnot. Or I could walk into another room and put them where they belong. This is The Moving Toy Shop by Edmund Crispin. In these old Penguin classic crime mass market paperbacks with the green and white color scheme. I love these books. I have an Edmund Crispin omnibus and a whole bunch of these little mass market paperbacks. And then this one, all alone by itself, in exile from its brethren. So I'm just going to put these aside. Actually, that's not a bad idea. Let's, I say, when you're not actually here. God, I wish you were. If you were here, this would be so much easier. But then again, there are lots of you, so I don't see how you could be. I'm going to make a pile here, not only for the books that I'm taking off this shelf to get them out of the way, but also a separate pile for the books that I'm not going to put back on the shelf even now. I'm just going to move them. They're egregiously wrong. And unlike a lot of the hardcovers and trade paperbacks behind me that I have looked at in the course of this little book room tour and said, this doesn't belong here, there's no Jenga involved in these mass markets. I can simply remove them to another room. So I will do that. Same thing with this next one. This is a great science fiction novel, Startide Rising. I found this one. I grab these mass markets whenever I can. This one has one of these clear plastic covers on it. Not the kind of thing you usually see with a mass market paperback. And I grabbed this one not only for that, and because I'm sure it was just $1, but also because this reminds me of my long-lost original version of this book. I read this book when it first came out. When it came to the, to the bookstore, to the paperback section, I grabbed it right away just for the evocative cover. And that cover looked just like this one in that it doesn't have any notice on it of all the awards this book would go on to win, because it hadn't won them yet. So all of my other, I don't know if I have one right to hand, probably not. All of my other paperback copies of this book have, Hugo Award, Nebula Award, all that sort of thing on it, or worst of all, the Uplift saga. There was no Uplift saga. The Sundiver had a similar backdrop world to this book, but there was no idea of a saga, much less books in a sequence or numbered. God help us all. There was no idea of anything like that when this came out. And that reminds me, this copy of the book reminds me of that. But reminds or not, it doesn't belong in here. Okay, then we have an old Penguin mass market paperback. Believe it or not, I have 2 copies of this. I'm never going to see a 3rd copy, but I grab it whenever I can because it's just delightful. This is by Joseph Dean, and it is called Hatred, Ridicule, or Contempt. It's a little Penguin book of libel cases, and it's hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. Taken from court records, and just delightful. Absolutely delightful. What I wouldn't give to find a durable copy of this book. The reason why I have 2 paperbacks, I don't think both the paperbacks are in here. But the reason why I have 2 is because I do go back to this. I dearly love it. It's just the extemporaneous wit of some of the people involved in some of these cases on their feet in the courtroom. Wonderful. Okay, then we have an old Rand McNally. Are you going to tell me when you came out? You very well may not. You very well may not. 1898. An old Rand McNally guide to Boston and its environs from Rand McNally. This is from well more than a century ago, and this has black and white photographs of all kinds of places. There's Arlington Street Church. Let's find an environment. Oh man, there are the lions of the Boston Public Library. There's Deb climbing the stairs in one of her ankle-hiding skirts. You go down those stairs and you walk out onto a full view of Trinity Church, just right across the street, directly across a small street. That right down those stairs and through the main lobby of the library takes you out onto the street. You come up those stairs in between these 2 lions, which are not identical, and then when you go up these stairs to that landing right there, what's behind this wall is Bates Hall, one of my favorite places in the entire world. Here we go. That is the Boston Public Library. And just look at that. You've got a streetcar, and there's Deb again in her ankle-hiding skirt. And you've got the library, but it's unencumbered. It's completely unencumbered. This view is impossible now. Not only could you not get this angle has been filled in by buildings. The street now runs like this along the front of the building. But you could never get this skyline. This skyline is completely gone. It's entirely filled with buildings, with taller buildings all around it. So this is, obviously, you would not use an 1898 Rand McNally guide to walk your way around Boston, although almost everything that's in here is still there. Is still there. The one very notable exception, I'm not sure, I probably can't find it quickly here, but the one notable exception that isn't still there is something called Scully Square. Still a sore spot for Steve, even after all this time. Scully Square was part of a thriving, admittedly seedy, mongrel region of Boston that was flattened by eminent domain in order to erect our beautiful City Hall and its windswept, completely antiseptic, Blade Runner-esque concrete plaza. Shops, tenements, bookstores, theaters, restaurants, all just bulldozed. Because Robert Moses said so. Anyway, then we have Saikaku Ihara. I think this author has come up on this channel before. This is an old, what is this, Tuttle? Yes, this is an old Tuttle version translated by E. Powys Mathers of Comrade Loves of the Samurais. This is a delightful Japanese classic, really delightful. This is heavily abridged. And there's another edition. Penguin, I don't think, has ever done this book. And that's a terrible shame. There's a very long version of this book, much longer than this. And it's all just stories from either history or from slightly folklorized history about samurai warriors and their young boy retainers or their young boy lovers, whatnot. A tremendously fascinating look at a part of samurai culture that, to put it mildly, the alt-right wants to ignore. And also delightful. This author is a delightful storyteller. Everything that the author encountered in the records that he looked through, he then reshaped into stories, into narratives. There's this, and there's, I think, a later translation that may be the Mathers translation just gussied up by someone else. But what I wouldn't give for someone to go at this work, again, completely fresh. Long introduction, great exhaustive notes, and a completely unabridged version of the book. It's a classic. It's hundreds of years old. It should be. It should be treated that way. And since it's a classic, it's going to go in the classic pile. And just for sentiment's sake, Boston and its environs will go in that pile as well. Oh goodness! All right. Well, this next one will not go in that pile. Maybe it should stay in this room. This is Hank Searles' book Jaws 2, with its famous poster cover. This was the novelization of the sequel to Jaws. I don't know how many of you have seen that sequel. Probably more of you are content with parroting the opinions of other people who say how bad it is, how much worse than the artiste film house original it is. And if you think that the sequel film is so much worse than the original, then of course you're not. I mean, the original novel is by Peter Benchley and is very good. It's a very good novel, and he's got a name. Nobody knows Harry Searles' name at all. He wrote a really good book, but nobody knows his name. And certainly, if you think that that Jaws 2 is a pale copy of Jaws, the original movie, then how much more will you think that about the novel of Jaws 2? And yet the novel is very, very good, just as the movie is very, very good. The movie is very good, and so is the novel. Then we have these two golden guides. What these are doing in here, I have no idea. We have bats and birds. These little golden guides that aren't really made anymore, not in this form. The golden guide, the bird guide, is just a staple. I have so many copies of this. I've been through this so many times, where you get a beautiful painting of the bird. And then, a brief look at its distribution and a little bit about its natural history particulars. Just lovely stuff. I wonder if I can quickly find my own nemesis. I wonder if I could do that. I ought to have the page marked after all this time, but probably I don't. My nemesis being the English house sparrow, which I have. I have a whole bunch of English house sparrows that are sort of mine. They're not really mine. They don't really care about me, but they very much like the food that I give them. And I have been doing that forever, just forever. Yeah, there we go. There's the house sparrow. Those are mine. Those gray-capped sparrows are mine. And here the picture shows you a rain gutter, and it shows you the sparrow's mate is setting up a house, which they often do in the wainscoting of houses. They do it in the wainscoting of this house. They spend all day out in the bushes. I have tall bushes outside the front of the house, and they spend all day there. And they won't go anywhere else. They won't wander very far if I provide them with water in addition to food. If the bird bath is full of water, if there are cans or trays or whatnot of water readily available to them right where I'm giving them food, then they'll spend the whole day. They won't go anywhere. It's only if they need water that they will fly around, that they will run the risk of flying into the territory of other birds. There are large collections of water minutes away in either direction. So I guess that's worth the risk. But I noticed that when I leave out all that they need, when I leave out food in plentiful amounts and water, they don't go anywhere. They spend all day here and then retire into the wainscoting. They retire into the housing, the siding of the house. That's their home. They don't actually live in anything that was born in nature. They live in a house, just like I do. Okay, then at long last we have a classic. This is Tom Sawyer in the old Magnum Easy Eye edition that has Mark Twain, the Phantom of Mark Twain, resting his hands on the shoulder of one of his most famous fictional creations. I love these old Magnum Easy Eye editions. I used to have a whole bunch of them. Now I just have a few. The only thing that I don't like about this cover is that this book was not written by Samuel Clemens. This book was written by Mark Twain. If Samuel Clemens had wanted to write this book, he would have put his name on it. Instead, Mark Twain wanted to write this book, and it's not your place as the editor of the Magnum Easy Eye paperback edition to change that. That bugs me quite a bit. Okay, that one's going to stay in the classics, right? And then, all right, well, this is a classic. We just saw it the other day. This is Elliot S. Maggin, The Last Superman, The Last Son of Krypton. This paperback will never be reissued, but this paperback is not the only version. I have a hardcover. So I think the Science Fiction Book Club or somebody did a no frills hardcover of this with a dust jacket that I was miraculously lucky enough to find, and that's in this room. I believe that was one of the first things we looked at. So this is actually the second copy. Then we have an old, another Ballantine book. This is The Best of Cordwainer Smith, with a Darrell K. Sweet cover there, where you have major characters from some of his most famous stories walking along Alpha Ralpha Boulevard there. These are great. These short stories are absolutely great. And this volume, very helpfully, comes with a timeline that was created by the compiler of the book, a timeline of Cordwainer Smith's future history, of his instrumentality of mankind. Very, very good. I'm not sure that it belongs here, but I can see already, just looking at the back shelf, that there's another copy of this same book on the back shelf. So this really is useful. This needs to be done. We're just going to push on to the end of the first row of these transverse books with a mass market paperback of The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan with the classic step back artwork there. It's slightly different from the cover. Eye of the World, of course, was on my mind because of the TV show adaptation that I watched up in Vermont, and I got a hardcover. The publisher Tor reissued a hardcover with this artwork. I got that in the bookstore just out of enthusiasm, and I have the ebooks with the new ebook cover artwork. It doesn't have this classic cover art. But when I saw this for $1, I grabbed it. Then we have something we've also seen just recently. This is the Superman story. This is a book-length adaptation of Action Comics number 500, where Superman, the first half of it is him reciting for visitors the story of his origin. There is Superboy rejoicing at the arrival on Earth of his dog. After all these years, his dog is not dead, did not die with Krypton, but actually makes his way to Earth and gains superpowers. Superman actually says, let's see here. In the years I was growing up, learning about life, becoming a man, there were things I could share with Krypto, that's the superdog, things I desperately needed to share, or the pain of being alone would have been too great. Ma and Pa, my friends, wouldn't have understood. It's difficult to explain. They were little things. They may not seem so important to you. Things like the feeling of the wind in your face in a way no one else in the world can feel it, or the sound bullets make when they bounce off living flesh. Fantastic. Just fantastic that the writer would think about that sort of thing. Then we have a mass market paperback of a Penguin, much obliged, Jeeves. I love these old Penguins with this particular artist. I love this, if I could find the whole of them in these mass markets, although the mass markets themselves are not particularly sturdy, and I have all of Woodhouse on ebook, which is particularly sturdy. I grab these whenever I see them. I don't think I have more than one or two. But that's obviously a classic, so that's going to stay in here. Then we have this tiny little paperback of A Shropshire Lad. A.E. Houseman's A Shropshire Lad, just a tiny little afterthought of a book. Amazingly, I don't have any other edition of Shropshire Lad. I just have this. I should. Penguin, I don't think, makes a trade paperback, and I don't think I've ever seen one of those ornate slipcase hardcovers or anything of this, one of the most influential poetry anthologies of modern times. And this is the only version that I have of it. Then another Magnum Easy Eye edition. This is Dracula, with Bela Lugosi on the cover there, and the original owner's name. Who was this? Carrie Holton originally owned this. I had a pristine copy of this of my own years and years ago, but got rid of it. I just got rid of it. So I found this. I've never seen it since. This is the only copy I've seen in years. Then 3 Bantam paperbacks of modern classics to send us off for today. The first one being Nicholas Montserrat's novel, The Cruel Sea. This is a World War II novel that is one of the best things ever written about war, one of the best books to come out of World War II. Just fantastic. Just a fantastic novel. Can't recommend it strongly enough. If you hear the description, you know, a World War II seafaring combat novel, and you think, well, that's definitely not for me. It might be for my grandfather, but it's not for me. In this case, I understand why you would say that. In most cases, you'd be right. But in this case, you're wrong. Dead wrong. This is for you. You would love it. Absolutely love it. Then a Boston classic. This is The Last Hurrah by Edwin O'Connor in the old mass market paperback. I have this in a hardcover, and I have this as an ebook, but this is the paperback that I read until it fell apart. This is a great political novel, a great comic novel, about the last hurrah of one battered old political figure who wants to run for office one more time and thinks he might be able to do it, even though it's pretty clear to him in the course of the novel that he is the living embodiment of an older and now gone style and philosophy of politics. And it's not coming back. His old world of wards and ward heels and whatnot is not coming back. And he knows that, but he thinks he might be able to squeeze in one last victory. Just a terrific novel. And finally, okay, so these are 3 great novels here. The last one is Look Homeward Angel by Thomas Wolfe. That I love this old Bantam paperback because it says right on the cover, just unambiguously, the great American novel. No one would call it that anymore. But there were a time, there were a couple of decades when people did. And it's florid, it's overwritten, you have to be in the mood for Thomas Wolfe. But if you are, oh boy, this will still work. Better, I think, than anything else that he wrote. So there you go. That is a shelf tour and the library tour, and also shelf cleaning. Great, much needed. And we will move on to the transverse books on the second step next time. So I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.